Hello and welcome to Background Briefing, available 24/7 at backgroundbriefing.org. I'm Ian Masters, and today we'll look into a number of stories and issues in the news. We will begin on this Thanksgiving with an exploration of what we can be thankful for in this otherwise bleak time of creeping fascism, looming war abroad and civil war at home, political polarization, and societal division. Joining us is Richard Parker, who teaches economics and public policy at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government and is a senior fellow at the Shorenstein Center. He's the former managing editor of Ramparts, was a co-founder of Mother Jones magazine, and serves on the editorial board of The Nation. His books include The Myth of the Middle Class and John Kenneth Galbraith, His Life, His Politics, His Economics. Then, as Trump pardoned turkeys following the annual White House tradition, he was unable to resist insults against Schumer and Pelosi and J.B. Pritzker, instead of celebrating a holiday of goodwill, family, friends, and feasting. Joining us to talk turkey is Jackie Mitchell, a political data analyst at Open Secrets, with experience covering ballot measures, campaign finance, and direct democracy law at Ballotopedia. She has also worked with local nonprofit organizations as well as a National Political Action Committee, and she has a new report at Open Secrets we will discuss. Gobbling Up Influence, What's on the Turkey Industry's Political Plate. Then finally, Sasha Linden Cohen speaks with Brian Holmes, a cultural critic, ecologist, and activist who has worked with activists and artists in Europe and the Americas. He's the co-founder of Watershed Art and Ecology in Chicago, a gallery and community space that explores the intersections of artistic and political practice. Sasha explores how art and activism can uplift political dissent and inspire community organizing at a time when all hands on deck are needed to stop Trump from destroying America and its democracy. And before we begin, for over a decade, we have warned that Trump is both a criminal and likely a traitor, not to mention he's mentally unstable, egomaniacal, woefully ignorant, wildly incompetent, insatiably greedy, and corrupt. Now it should be clear to all that his chaotic misrule must be ended as soon as possible, and until that happens, Background Briefing will continue to investigate and expose MAGA criminality and cruelty. But more importantly, explore strategies and popular movements to bring about regime change as quickly as possible to restore democracy and civility and stop the systematic destruction of the United States at home and its standing abroad. To help sustain us with public broadcasting and freedom of the press itself under assault as Trump's billionaire buddies buy up the mainstream media, you can make a tax-deductible donation to our nonprofit foundation, the Public Truth Media Foundation, at publictruthmedia.org or at backgroundbriefing.org/donate. And thank you. Joining us now on this Thanksgiving is Richard Parker, who teaches economics and public policy at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government and is a senior fellow at the Shorenstein Center. He is the former managing editor of Ramparts, was a co-founder of Mother Jones magazine, and serves on the editorial board of The Nation. His books include The Myth of the Middle Class and John Kenneth Galbraith, His Life, His Politics, His Economics. Welcome to Background Briefing, Richard Parker.
Nice to be with you, Ian.
Well, thanks for taking a break from the turkey and the trimmings and joining us here. And of course, it turns out, Richard, that over the years we've spoken, you've sort of become my go-to guy for optimism since, I'm usually under the weight of the daily dose of doom, just covering the whipsawing craziness of Donald Trump and what he's doing to the country, which has been happening now for the last 10 years, and it just gets worse and worse. So notwithstanding my pessimism here, what do you feel that we have to be thankful for on this Thanksgiving?
Marjorie Taylor Greene, James Comey, the former head of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Letitia James of the New York Attorney General's office are a starting place. The defection of Marjorie Taylor Greene and her sudden announcement that she's going to resign from Congress as of January is one sign that the so-called base, or at least the leadership of the Trump base, is showing fissures that were there all along, but that are now having consequences. So I think that's important. I think that the federal judge's dismissal of the cases against Comey and James in such sweeping terms, in terms of the illegality of the process that led to their indictment, is another measure that ought to be a source of conditioned hope. Again, I don't want to get my optimism confused with Pollyannishness. I'm not a Pollyanna, but my optimism I think of as more a hopeful realism for several reasons. One of which is America has gone through dark moments since the very beginning. Since Thanksgiving Day back in the 1620s, as a matter of fact, in a number of ways. And when I think about the Constitution finally being passed and then the Bill of Rights being added, basically the Congress, which passes the Bill of Rights, which is going to vastly expand and solidify the constitutionality of our individual rights, is followed within a decade by the Congress passing the Alien and Sedition Acts, because it means to crush support for the French Revolution that has emerged among a substantial number of Americans. And so we have that as a kind of starting pace for the Republic. And then we have a series of various kinds of crises, all of which at the time seemed to many people insurmountable and absolutely the likely end of the Republic, or at least of the nation as the democratic society that we hope and dream of, that turn out not to have the lasting power that the naysayers and also the leaders of these dark periods had thought. We're not in a situation where we're looking at the 1,000-year Reich of Donald Trump and his descendants. I think that what we're seeing is that there is a collapse going on of public support in a variety of ways as more and more people say to themselves, this isn't actually what we signed up for. We were angry about the Democratic Party. We were angry about the way in which the White House misled us about the health of a sitting president. We're angry about the way in which his successor nominee was selected rather than actually nominated. And I think that in truth, what we're now seeing is people in a wide variety of ways are saying, we didn't sign up for what it is that Trump has brought us to. And we have yet to see how the Trump economy is going to play out. I have a strong sense that we're going to see some radical downturns in the stock market, that we're going to see more and more evidence that Bitcoin is a version of a Ponzi scheme, not a potential new global currency, and that the rising levels of unemployment, which are in some ways now susceptible to being masked by the ways in which data is limited within the Department of Labor in terms of its circulation. All those together are going to represent a further diminution of Trump's popularity. And that's not even to enter into the discussion of Trump's increasingly manic and psychotic and crazed behavior and speech.
Well, when you talk about the dark periods, Richard, of course, there's never been a malevolent president, a president who was empowering our worst enemies like Vladimir Putin. There's never been an American president who has weakened this country at such a pace. I mean, Trump's dismantling our democracy, our government. He's undermining the rule of law while weaponizing it against his political enemies. He's destroying our educational institutions and replacing education with indoctrination. He's attacking our science and defunding research while rewarding ignorance. He's unleashing his private militia against US citizens and non-citizens alike. He's reviving racism and xenophobia. He's weakening our defense as he purges and divides the ranks in our military. He's eviscerating our intelligence, having shut down our counterintelligence. He's trashing our alliances while cozying up to our enemies. He's undercutting the primacy of the dollar with crypto scams and tariff chaos. He's plundering our environment and poisoning our future and impoverishing most Americans while enriching a few billionaires. And now, of course, he's trying to take away health care and food from the poorest among us. So that's just only a part of the list of the indictments against him.
I was going to say that is an impressive list. I hope you were doing it from memory and not reading, because I think of you as being one of the sharpest critics and critical analysts of what, in fact, is going on under Trump. But what I've tried to say when you and I have talked, and you described me as being an optimist, and I think of myself as a hopeful realist, is that, again, I think that you're right that we haven't had a person in the White House that is so malevolent. But I can think of figures like Andrew Johnson in the immediate aftermath of the Civil War, overturning what had been, in some ways, the reasons that the war had been fought and seeking immediately to reverse the kinds of gains of liberty for African Americans who had spent 200 years in slavery. And, you know, it didn't lead, that is, Johnson, the end of Johnson's term didn't lead to a new Arcadia by any means. But it was one more impediment that was set aside. I think what I'd probably highlight is the number of legal cases that have been brought and the willingness of federal judges, including appeals judges, to seek to check his power. And that while there are ways in which he has been pressing against the limits of regulation and law, he has, in general, not crossed the line into open illegality across the board. He's certainly testing the legality, and we can imagine him in the rulings of the Supreme Court that are upcoming, gaining some leverage to continue what he's doing. But I want to wait and see, and I want to look at the recent elections that we've just had, not just the governorships of New Jersey and Virginia, but smaller races, the Supreme Court in a couple of states like Pennsylvania, even down to local elections, where what we're seeing is a radical boost in turnout among folks on our side of this equation, and a collapsing turnout among his supporters. People who, if they were passionate for him at the beginning of this, are no longer showing that passion by showing up to vote.
So, do we have to rely on scandal as opposed to a strong political argument to bring down this dreadful regime? In other words, is the Epstein files, not that we're likely to see them soon, and I'm sure this Department of Justice, which is now essentially a criminal organization headed by Trump's lawyer, who's really behaving in a way that's just beyond breathtaking. I mean, the only good news there is that their mendacity is only eclipsed by their incompetence. Um,
Yes.
but the long and the short of it is that Epstein's list, I think that would be really important for the American people to get the list of the people that molested these girls and in some case raped them. The girls know who did it. It hasn't
Right.
come public. They're being protected. And
Right.
that to me gets to one of the things that I find most disturbing about this era, the billionaire takeover of American politics, and that is the extent to which we're becoming a kind of class society, and
Hmm.
and the people in Epstein's orbit, the rich and powerful, the power elite, seem to be absolutely immune. They have impunity, and as long as that exists, and I guess in a way, it's a question of whether this dreadful woman down in the Club Fed in Texas will actually get pardoned. If that
Yeah.
happens,
Yeah.
then I'll just absolutely scream from the rafters. In other words,
Hmm.
that's my concerns about
Hmm.
the country as a country of fairness and justice.
Right.
And if we've lost that and we're ruled by a bunch of cynical, powerful people that don't give a damn about average Americans, then we're truly lost.
Uh, Look, I think that we are facing what is a truly dark period. There's no question about it. And I don't think that there is going to be a single bolt of lightning that comes down from the sky, whether from Jehovah or Zeus, to set this aright. These toxins have built in American society for decades and decades and decades. I in my own lifetime, could see what we're facing now forming during the Goldwater Revolution of the early 1960s that began to lay the ground for the new Republican Party that is the one that is tormenting us currently. I think that the other thing is that we have not been able to produce a unifying message about what it is that people like us want or stand for or are willing to do to better the lives of others. We can pass legislation that contains progressive programs of all sorts, but they remain basically unknown to the great majority of the American people. And so there's a failure of communication on our side in terms of getting across who we are and what we stand for. I think the second is that we're going to have to negotiate a new life in a new world in which the idea of American suzerainty or hegemony, it can no longer be taken as the given. We haven't yet seen what the outlines of this are going to be, but at places like the G20 meeting, one has the sense that leaders of a lot of what have been considered second and third tier countries are thinking of ways and working on ways to work around the United States to build a world of power relationships that doesn't rely on Washington. And I think that that by itself may be a good thing. But we will have to see, but it is part of what has been unleashed, and that over which Trump really has no control. And so I want to pay attention not to what Trump is up to, because what Trump is up to has become all too familiar and in some ways kind of exhausting to spend our time analyzing, when the issue really is how do we take back power step by step in a way that protects the Constitution, but is then committed to adapting the Constitution once we have power in ways that will do several things. Block forever the ability of men and women, such as Trump, to find office and to expose them if, in fact, they morph into the Trump-like creature once in office, to have institutionally powerful means for blocking that executive, limiting the executive's power, cutting off the budget for the executive, all of which we have allowed to atrophy or never installed in the existing body of law that covers the executive branch of the United States Constitution.
But immediately, in a year from now, in November, isn't that the sort of our Waterloo? In other words,
Well, it
if
could be
it,
our Stalingrad. It could be our Stalingrad. You know, it could be that this we've been living with Operation Barbarossa, and that we have given up a lot of territory. And in a sense, Washington is being besieged in the way that Leningrad was besieged during the war, and that there have been and will be more casualties in this war. But I think that we are coming toward a turning point, and I do think that next November's election are going to be a powerful indicator. polls that I have just seen rank generic preference for Democrats generically in the next congressional race well ahead of the Republicans. The polls show that there is no area of policy in which Trump's popularity or approval rates are climbing. They're deteriorating in all of them. He has beyond Epstein affordability, which is part of what he was doing with Mamdani and that out-of-body experience that he created in the Oval Office, where the two of them suddenly were bros rather than enemies. And that is, he is a master of understanding audience and also understanding the ability to grab control of a show such that he needs now to pivot onto something like affordability that, from his point of view, is a preventive from further consideration of Epstein, but from our point of view, is exactly the terrain on which we should be fighting our most important battles in the months and years ahead.
Well, that is an optimistic, encouraging, and also realistic. And that is the task ahead of us. So I thank you for joining us on this Thanksgiving, Richard
I,
Parker.
I think we have some reason for thanks. And thank you for the work that you do, Ian. So celebrate as well with your family as I celebrate with mine.
Well, thank you, Richard. And again, I've been speaking with Richard Parker, who teaches economics and public policy at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government and is a senior fellow at the Shorenstein Center. He is a former managing editor of Ramparts, was co-founder of Mother Jones magazine, and serves on the editorial board of The Nation. And his books include The Myth of the Middle Class and John Kenneth Galbraith, His Life, His Politics, His Economics. We're going to take a brief station break and back talking turkey and how, instead of celebrating a holiday of goodwill, family, friends, and feasting, Trump, when pardoning turkeys in the annual White House tradition, was unable to resist insulting Schumer and Pelosi and J.B. Pritzker.
I've got plenty to be thankful for. I haven't got a great big yacht to sail from shore to shore. Still I've got plenty to be thankful for. I've got plenty to be thankful for. No private car, no caviar, no carpet on my floor. Still I've got plenty to be thankful for. I've got eyes to see with, ears to hear with, arms to hug with, lips to kiss with, someone to adore. How could anybody ask for more?
Welcome back. I'm Ian Masters, and this is Background Briefing, available 24/7 at backgroundbriefing.org. And joining us now on this Thanksgiving is Jackie Mitchell, a political data analyst at Open Secrets with experience covering ballot measures, campaign finance, and direct democracy law at Ballotopedia. She has also worked with local nonprofit organizations as well as the National Political Action Committee. And she has a new report at Open Secrets, Gobbling Up Influence, What's on the Turkey Industry's Political Plate. Welcome to Background Briefing, Jackie Mitchell.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for joining us and happy Thanksgiving. And in your article, you point out that the annual presentation of the National Thanksgiving Turkey at the White House is a tradition that began in 1947 when the National Turkey Federation presented a live turkey to President Harry Truman as a part of the lobbying effort to promote turkey consumption. But at this year's White House ceremony, President Donald Trump certainly didn't seem to have a lot of holiday cheer to offer or goodwill. He basically talked about the turkey that he pardoned, mentioned the infamous prison in El Salvador, where migrants have been deported to and, literally locked away for life. He said that the birds should be named Chuck and Nancy, And then he went on to say, I would never pardon those people. Then he went on to say that he had a joke prepared about J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, but, quote, I refuse to talk about the fact that he's a fat slob. I don't mention it. So what did you make of that usually, pleasant season of goodwill event at the White House?
Yeah, well, that sounds a lot like something Donald Trump would say for sure. On Tuesday, he pardoned the two turkeys named Gobble and Waddle. And yeah, it's very interesting. I actually didn't know that the history of the turkey pardon could actually be traced back to a lobbying campaign by the National Turkey Federation.
So this is an interesting that what you brought to the table here. So let's talk turkey about turkeys. I mean, some of the statistics are pretty extraordinary. There are roughly 46 million turkeys are eaten on Thanksgiving Day, and that's 20% of the 200 million turkeys produced nationally every year. And the National Turkey Federation represents the interest of nearly 300 companies involved in turkey production and distribution, and about 95% of the industry, representing 95% of the industry, which includes the big turkey producers, Butterball, Cargill, Cooper Farms, Jennie-O, Purdue Farms, and Tyson Foods. So how did this evolve? I mean, do we have to go back to the pilgrims? I mean, this has turned into, giving to the pilgrims some food so that they won't starve, which apparently the Native Americans did, as a far cry from this huge industry that we're talking about.
Yeah, of course. So Thanksgiving is, said to be a tradition stemming from the feast shared by the Plymouth colonists or the Pilgrims and the Native American Wampanoag people that lived in what is now Massachusetts. And the Pilgrims are said to have gone out to hunt turkeys for the feast, which is why we celebrate by eating turkey now.
So just to some more statistics, 44% of the global turkey production in the world happens here in the United States. And in 2024, the US produced over 5 billion pounds of turkey at an estimated value of $3.69 billion. And of that, 486 million pounds were exported, mostly to Mexico. So this is an important industry then.
Yeah, of course. And every large industry like this definitely needs to have some influence with lobbying and donation through political action committees to candidates and PACs and things of that sort so that they have a seat at the table and are able to influence people who have influence over bills that matter to their industry.
And your organization, Open Secrets, attract what, 3.28 million in lobbying expenditures by the National Turkey Federation each year from 2010 to 2023. The NFT spent 140,000 on lobbying. The only years that the Federation exceeded its typical lobbying budgets, 2008, 2009, 2024, and 2025, coincided with economic downturns. So this year, then, do we have any figures? I guess it's a little early, right?
Yeah, so this year so far, they have spent $150,000 on lobbying, which is just $10,000 over their $140,000 usual budget. And we still have another quarter to go, so that number is expected to rise. And yeah, it's very interesting. I just found out about all of this when I was going through the data and noticed that the only years that their donations surpassed their usual totals were around the 2008, 2009 economic crisis and also 2024 and 2025, in which we're also having some economic issues.
So what are the National Turkey Federation? They lobby about what? Avian influenza, disease prevention, logistics, trade, immigration. I imagine they also are now lobbying about tariffs, right? With Mexico as an important market.
Yes, absolutely. And this year, the National Turkey Federation lobbied on a bill and on issues related to the impact of tariffs on the turkey industry. And they've also lobbied on issues related to immigration, since turkey production relies on immigrant labor.
So when President Trump on Tuesday pardoned the turkey and insulted his political enemies, he also went on to say that this year Thanksgiving turkeys will be cheaper than ever, and Thanksgiving dinners will be cheaper. What's your reading on that? What kind of facts and figures do you have on that?
Yeah, well, there is a new analysis out from the American Farm Bureau Federation's Market Intel series, and they said that economic factors and disease challenges have driven wholesale turkey prices up by about 40%.
40%. So he's off by quite a bit then, right?
Seems like it.
So where does this lobbying money go? I mean, I guess the big states that produce turkeys, their representatives would be where most of the lobbying goes.
Yes, we do see that a good chunk of the contributions given by the National Turkey Federation have gone to PACs and candidates in states like Minnesota, which is the largest turkey producer in the country, as well as North Carolina, Arkansas, Indiana, Missouri, Virginia, Iowa, and Pennsylvania. And we also found that the National Turkey Federation tends to give more to Republican congressional office holders than Democratic ones. And of course, the largest donations tend to go to candidates in those top turkey producing states.
So what's your sense then of when Trump pardoned these two turkeys, Gobble and Waddle? For some reason or other, I think only Gobble showed up in the photo ops. Do you know what happened to Waddle?
I don't know, but I do know that the two of them are going to live out a nice life, not being on someone's dinner table.
And how does that work out? I mean, where do they go? Because they can't, obviously, they're so public that they're being pardoned. So you can't very well, send them off to a farm and eat them later. They have, I guess, who polices whether or not these turkeys live out their full lifespan?
So the two turkeys that are provided to the White House by the National Turkey Federation, Gobble and Waddle, who this year were raised on a farm in North Carolina that is used to supply turkeys for Butterball, another large turkey producer, were pardoned, of course, and they will live under the care of the Department of Poultry Science at North Carolina State University in Raleigh.
So here we are talking about turkeys on Thanksgiving, and while we're speaking around the country, people are gobbling it down. And this is a wonderful holiday. I mean, I really like Thanksgiving because it's not a commercial holiday. That you don't have to send Hallmark cards and presents and stuff. Families, friends get around, feast together, and it's an otherwise really sort of lovely occasion. But on the other hand, 44 million Americans face food insecurity, and approximately 1 in 5 children in the US, which is nearly 14 million kids, are living with hunger. So, how do we balance that out? Because this is a day of feasting, but I don't know how you can feast when others are not, when others are hungry.
I know there are organizations that work on giving food to the less fortunate, including Operation Turkey, which donates to feed the less fortunate on Thanksgiving Day.
Well, I must say that this is an interesting kind of exploration into a little known part of Thanksgiving. Not that that the table is not dominated by the bird, which is, what everybody spends hours cooking. But I didn't really know about all of this industry behind it, the industry lobbying, and all of these turkey facts. So I'm really grateful that we're able to talk turkey with you.
Yeah, thanks. It was very interesting diving into all this as I put this report together. So,
Well, I thank you for joining us here today, Jackie Mitchell.
thank you very much.
And again, I've been speaking with Jackie Mitchell, who is a political data analyst at Open Secrets with experience covering ballot measures, campaign finance, and direct democracy law at Ballotopedia. She's also worked with local nonprofit organizations as well as national political action committees, and she has a new report at Open Secrets, Gobbling Up Influence: What's on the Turkey Industry's Political Plate. We're going to take a brief station break and back with Sasha Linden Cohen, exploring how art and activism can uplift political dissent and inspire community organizing at a time when all hands on deck are needed to stop Trump from destroying America and its democracy.
I don't mind stealing bread from the mouths of decadence, but I can't feed all the powerless when my cup's already overfilled. Yeah, but it's on the table, the fire's cooking, and the farming babies with slaves are working. The blood is on the table and the mouths are choking, but I'm going hungry. I don't mind.
Welcome back. I'm Sasha Linden Cohen, and you're listening to Background Briefing, available 24/7 at backgroundbriefing.org. For today's Thanksgiving show, I wanted to talk about the ways that we can try to foster hope and community in times that can feel pretty bleak, and why it's important to be thankful for that. Our guest today is Brian Holmes. He's sort of a professional at this. His background is as an essayist and mapmaker, and he currently runs Watershed Art and Ecology, which is kind of a community center / artist residency in Chicago, but it's also a lot more than that. They host exhibits and discussions and try to tackle a whole range of human predicaments, as they put it: societal, environmental, economic, and racial. Brian will definitely be able to explain all of this better than me, so welcome to the show, Brian.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I actually run this place with my partner, Claire Pentecost, and our idea was to turn a little bit of inheritance money into something we could share, into something that would allow us not only to build community, but to participate in building community, because building community is not just what you do, it's also what other people do.
Yeah, I was going to ask, how did it come to be? Can you tell me a little bit about Watershed and how you see its mission and how it came about?
hmm Well, sort of in terms of the space, we found this amazing building, which was being lived in as a private home, but which was built as a clubhouse for a Czech national renewal movement, the Sokal movement, which they were these gymnasia scattered around the United States. And of course, it originated in what was then the Czech nation under the boot of the Austro-Hungarians, right? So they wanted to, like many ethnic groups in the late 19th and early 20th century, they wanted to focus on their community and their health. And so this was like a young men's sporting place. And the result of that, so there was a gymnasium in the back. The result of that is a very beautiful building with an old library, tons of, sort of wood. And then you go through a door and you're on a mezzanine looking down into this former gymnasium, which has a sort of dark wooden floor. And then we clad the whole thing in plywood because we wanted to create a warm space that is no longer the white cube of the 20th century. We feel that that's done with and over. We wanted to create something that doesn't exist, a space dedicated to art and ecology. And so we've done that, and people really like it, I must say.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a beautiful physical space. I'm curious, I guess, about the sort of thought behind creating something that's warm. Your background is as an essayist and map maker. You've worked in political ecology. How did all of that lead you to create an art space? And I guess, how would you say that this art space is different from a traditional gallery? It feels like there's a really strong mission statement that extends to political philosophy and sort of community building, not just showing beautiful pieces and giving a platform to artists. What is the sort of intersection there?
Well, first of all, this is Chicago, you know. Chicago is full of artist-run spaces with ethical missions. So in that regard, we're very happy with our peers who are engaged in a similar way with what we do. Maybe the difference with us, well, my wife Claire, she's been an artist for, all her life and has taught at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago for 20 years until 25, I think, until retiring recently. I've been always involved with art and activism and first political economy and then political ecology. So our interest led us to a project in Germany called the Anthropocene Campus. And this, we kind of saw this as a chance to meet a lot of people involved with art and culture who care about ecology and about climate change. We also uh, realized that we could really learn something from this program, which was directly involved with a group called the Anthropocene Working Group, who are professional geologists who are trying to study and give a formal definition to the period of the Earth system's history that we're living through right now, a period of tremendous change and even threatening change, of course. We got involved with this, but it's not like what you think. The way we got involved with this whole project was through these experimental sort of seminar type things in Germany, where we led one of those seminars once, and then through a huge art and science program that took place on the Mississippi River in 2019, from the headwaters to the Gulf of Mexico, with 5 different field stations, including us. That is to say, not just Claire and I, but a whole group of people in Chicago, and uh, and a closing, 9-day event in New Orleans. This was a game changer because it brought together the wide range of interests, specialties, desires, and maybe also needs for change that ecology really requires. So art can be, art's interpreted always in a frame, right? And so we wanted to create a different sort of frame, a different sort of set of references, of concerns in which an artistic gesture can have its meaning. And by collaborating with all these people who came both from the United States and from the rest of the world, um, this gave us some clues about how to create a different frame for art.
Mm. I think a lot about Anthropocene as I've kind of commonly understood it, or if, as I, took classes in college, it had this sort of doomsday tone to it. So it's interesting that you're bringing it up in this way. That's like there are all these generative groups thinking about the idea of Anthropocene and building community and art and sort of combining all of these things. I guess I'm curious about the role of community building, why it's important to this kind of activism, and I guess what that model, what has worked from that model and how other places can learn from it. What have your takeaways been after a few years of running this kind of space?
Yeah, this is a great question. I mean, people think, rightly so, that the Anthropocene, climate change, I mean, these are real bummers, right? These are major downers, right? These are a devastating kind of knowledge, which happens to be knowledge about reality and about changes that are happening as we live. And to be able to grapple with that requires several things that are different from what consumer society gives us. First of all, I think you need a sense of the tragic nature of life. And the sense of the tragic nature of life implies empathy. It implies an ability to feel the pain of others who might not even be of your own species, That's important towards being a human being. And it's only when you're able to create community around this kind of empathy that you can stand up to the the rather formidable challenges of the present. And so I think there's something there that's extremely current, extremely timely, that answers a kind of need that many people have not had up until this point. But now that we have the double, challenge of authoritarianism and with its negation of climate change, the really major challenge I think that confronts everyone. Um, you can see that this kind of relation to culture, to your own life as a series of occasions for entertainment is just not it's not the way to live.
Mm.
It's not the
Can,
way to fully live and to be able to really share something with someone else. Because a lot of the depth of sharing with someone else cannot be predicated on the denial of reality. It just won't work. You won't really be able to share something with someone else, unless it's just your denial.
no, absolutely. I'm curious, I guess, how this looks in reality, and if you might be able to tell me about some of the projects that you've had in the past at Watershed or that are upcoming that sort of feel like it reaches that space of, I don't know, accessing empathy in order to create something generative, something that sparks hope. Because I think a lot of these movements, it's really hard to get people mobilized if you can't provide any ounce of, inspiration. And I feel like combining art with these ecological issues is helpful in doing that. And as we're speaking on Thanksgiving, trying to understand like how what there is to be grateful for in terms of new models of engaging with issues that look different than the ones that we've grown up with or been told about.
Yes, well, you're completely right about the role of art in that, and I think also the role of community. I mean, we run a warm space. It's a space that where when you come there, I think everyone expects they're going to have an encounter with an artwork of some kind and also a conversation. And usually at the end of the opening, we bring out some hot soup or something like that, and we stay until 11 or midnight talking with people. And and so what do people experience? Why do they come? Well, normally they come to see some art. So right now we have a fabulous exhibition by a woman named Marie Lorenz up in the space. It consists of collaged pieces hanging from cords that have been stretched in the air. So you have a kind of labyrinth of these 13 or 14-foot high collage pieces. They were made Marie Lorenz had, for 20 years, has been building her own boats and taking people out on the New York harbor and bringing them around the harbor using the energy of the tides and, of course, a little rowing to cover that distance and to explore the place. And so she and the people she goes with, they do a lot of beach combing. She then makes these incredible artworks with that trash that they pick up. They're contact prints that, she actually puts ink on the stuff, and then she puts paper down on the ink. Then she pulls that up, and now she's taken to collaging these on this incredible Japanese kozo paper, which is very thin and very strong. And
Mm.
so the result is you get something extremely beautiful, which is also speaking to you of an experience in an urban ecology, the New York Harbor.
Mm. Like behind this piece of art, there are countless people that have learned about the New York Harbor, that have engaged in community, that have like taken away something from a physical, real experience that might have taught them something or changed the way they see the world. So it's not the art exists beyond just what it is in the exhibit. It's sort of
Yes.
a broader thing.
Yes, and it appeals to people's capacity to change their sort of daily routine and the use they make out of their senses. Because obviously, if you're going out in the water, your whole perceptual and affective experience is going to be totally different in a rowboat in the New York Harbor. Well, we do that kind of all the time because a lot of the practice that is associated with our space involves public walks, going out with people into whether the urban environment, the edge of the city, or the countryside. And so this relation between a sort of experimental use of your own perception as typically in groups, and then an aesthetic experience, which you know, it sometimes is created by the people who've been on these walks. More
Mm,
often it's people who are interested in this sort of bundle of things. So you have experience, you have art, and then from time to time we have discursive events where people are talking, where people are analyzing something, and yeah.
mm. Absolutely. And I guess each one kind of bolsters the other. If you're able to engage in community, it's gonna bring you to the art in like a more intimate way. I'm curious as well. I know that you're a polyglot, that you spent many years in France as a translator, cultural critic, activist. Um, and I wondered about, I guess, what community building looks like across cultures. Is there a through line that you've seen in a lot of different places where you've done community organizing, a sort of hungriness for community to be at the center of artistic and political projects that transcends culture? Or yeah, can you speak to that in Chicago versus in other
Hmm.
places?
Hmm. Well, a similarity between Chicago and other places is that this sort of thing is apparently, good for some people, and yet it's not the mainstream thing. So it's not, you have to kind of step outside a little bit the standardized expectations to get involved with it. And that's, I think, true everywhere. I found in Europe that people were a little more willing to engage in collective projects and to recognize that what we call an avant-garde is basically always collective, that this doesn't come from individuals. This is a process of experimentation that pretty much has to go out beyond the self. Um, but so there's a familiarity with that goes also with with very willful forms of political organizing that you get in countries like France or Spain
Mm,
very readily. Now, the United States doesn't have any more these traditions of political radicalism and clearly doesn't have the same relation to aesthetic, vanguards and all that a country like France does with its history. But the United States has been very engaged in trying to overcome various forms of oppression that exist on the immediate social level and that people feel and suffer as individuals. I'm talking about racial inequality. I'm talking about, gender prejudice and really, harm. I mean, people are beat up, for being who they are sexually. And and this effort to overcome that, which is carried on by people of all races, creates a kind of different kind of vanguard that I really appreciate. I mean, very much not so much about ideology as it is about a commitment to others in which one remains true to oneself, let's say. To
mm.
this is something great, and this is a real resource in the United States that needs, I think, to be developed more.
Yeah, it seems like the work you do is really about trying to use art to change culture through creating this community and hope. So it feels apt for the holiday to be thinking about the kind of generative ways we can look at these issues in a world where we often are looking at them with a lot of darkness. So I really thank you so much for joining us today.
Great. Well, I'm glad to talk about it. I encourage people to give it a try. You think that, when you think everything is kind of going to hell, it's time to change yourself, and to change yourself requires bringing other people along. So, open up is what I'm going to say.
Absolutely. That's a great note to end on. Well, thank you so much for being here. And again, I've been speaking with Brian Holmes. He's a polyglot essayist, artist, and researcher. He worked with radical movements in France for 20 years before returning to Chicago, where he began working on political ecology and map making. Today, he helps animate the Watershed Art and Ecology, one of many artist-run spaces that keep the city alive for queers, freaks, and the non-normative.
And this has been Background Briefing. I'm Ian Masters, and I'd like to thank producers Graham Fitzgibbon, Asher Price, and Sasha Linden-Cohen. If you missed any of today's program and would like to explore our vast archives, you can find us at backgroundbriefing.org, where we include extended interviews, searchable by topic, and have made it easier for you to sign up for daily email updates and provide links to resources, articles, and books discussed on the program. Also, you can find links there to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and we highly encourage your ratings and reviews on these platforms. Find us on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Facebook at Ian Masters Media, and our new social media manager, Luke Susswood, is also posting highlights from the show on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram at Ian Masters Media. So please do help us reach more listeners by sharing this program with friends, family, and colleagues. And to help sustain this program into the future and ensure it remains free to all, please take a moment to support us by going to backgroundbriefing.org/donate and/or at publictruthmedia.org, where your tax-deductible donations, large and small, keep us broadcasting. And I'll be back tomorrow with another Background Briefing at backgroundbriefing.org. Bye for now.
One more light goes out.